Welcome to our on-campus presentation. The first thing I guess you might be thinking is, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I need, as an international student, to develop a strategy to deal with immigration questions that I'm going to be asked during the job search process? And the answer is sadly, yes. You're not going to believe how many American employers are going to ask you, the international student, to explain to them American immigration law. We'll go through when you will be most likely to encounter these types of situations. Big companies usually know about immigration. Mid-sized companies sometimes don't. Let's take a look at the job search timeline. So here's what the employment-based immigration timeline looks like. You start out as an F1 student in school in the box over to the left. Then moving toward the right, you graduate. You're an F1 student who graduates. Then you're an F1 student on OPT, and your goal is to get a work visa that leads to a green card. So the question is, when in that job search timeline, from student to OPT to work visa to green card, where in that process are you going to be asked to explain American immigration law? Questions about your immigration status on a job application. They're going to ask you things like, are you authorized to work in the United States? What kind of question is that? Then they're also going to ask you in a job interview or at a job fair, they're going to ask you all kinds of questions about work authorization. Are you authorized to work? How can we get you on our payroll? Do we have to do any sponsorship? And again, the American kids don't have to answer these questions, and you do. But let's figure out what we need to do to deal with it. As I mentioned earlier, there are two places where you're going to encounter immigration law questions. One, on the job application, and two, during the job interview or during conversations with employers at job fairs. Let's look at these two things in closer detail. Okay, here's our old friend again, the outline of the immigration process for students during the job search. You start out as a student in school, and then you graduate, and then you wind up on OPT, and eventually you want that long-term position that gets you the work visa. Where will these immigration questions about your status come up during this process? Number one, with job applications. The job application will be placed in front of you during any time that you're in school or around the time you're graduating or while you're on OPT. And job applications normally lead to employer interviews. Employer interview questions about your immigration status while on OPT will occur when you're in school and you're prior to graduation, or they will occur after graduation prior to being hired on OPT. Employer questions regarding the work visa normally come up during your OPT employment when you're trying to go from OPT to. Here are some specific tips for you to consider when developing a strategy in dealing with immigration questions on a job application. Job search tips for applications. For a full explanation of the following 3 job application slides, check out the Immigration Art video channel on YouTube. There I am on YouTube talking about this topic for an entire 16 minutes and 7 seconds. 16:7. Job applications, answering immigration questions. Just go to the link right here and you'll find me on YouTube. But for now, in addition to what I've got available on YouTube, just let's take a quick look at the next few slides regarding dealing with the immigration questions on a job application. Here we go. Job search tips, applications. What are some guidelines to use in answering questions about your immigration status on the application? Well, always tell the truth. And if a question is vague, your answer needs to be true. Again, if the question is vague on the job application, you need to answer it in a way that's true at the time you check the box. You want your application to look like everyone else's. When the child of an American citizen answers these questions, they don't even think twice about it. Am I authorized to work? Of course I am. When you're asked that question, what's the answer? What do they mean? When you're on campus with a campus job, off campus with CPT during school, after school, when you have OPT, that's work authorization. What are they talking about after OPT? This is your challenge. You've got to answer these seemingly innocent application questions with a lot of baggage, a lot of immigration rule baggage weighing you down, that American students don't have to think about or deal with. I'm here to help you develop a strategy to deal with this. What am I talking about? Let's take a look. Let's give it a try. Here's a question. Do you need sponsorship now or at any time in the future? What do you think the answer is? You get that on a job application. Here's another question on a job application. Are you legally authorized to work in the United States? What do you think the answer is to that? Are you permanently authorized to work in the United States? What do you think the answer is to that? Let's take each question one at a time and go through the thought process behind an answer that makes your application look like everybody else's and make that answer also true at the time you check the box. Here we go. Do you need sponsorship now or at any time in the future? What kind of question is that? The vague words there are need, sponsorship, and future. Let's work backwards. Do you need sponsorship now or at any time in the future? You're in college when you check the answer to that question on the application. Do you need sponsorship in the future? When? When in the future? Right now I can work on campus. That's authorization. When I work off campus as a student, I get CPT. That's authorization. And after I graduate, I get OPT. So, do I need sponsorship now or at any time in the future? No. I have authorization all the way through after graduation. So no, I don't. I don't need sponsorship now or at any time in the future. I have work authorization all the way through a time period after graduation. And then you check, I don't need sponsorship. Now your application looks just like an American's. And if the interviewer, when you get the interview, and you will get the interview if you answer the question that way, truthfully, like I just said, when you go for the interview, if the interviewer knows anything about immigration, which he or she may not, but if they do, and they ask you, what did you check? What did you check? You don't need sponsorship. From what I understand, you're going to need an H-1B. And then you say, oh, when you said future in that question, you meant way in the future after OPT? Oh, I wish you just asked me that. Do I need sponsorship after OPT? Yes. Yes, I do. Oh, when I read the word future while I was in school, I thought you meant the future at graduation. My time horizon as a student is very short. I don't know what I'm going to do after dinner. Am I going to go to the gym or am I going to study for my math exam? I don't, the future. At graduation, I have OPT. Misunderstanding. You might want to make your questions a little more clear and a little less vague. And quickly, the other two sources of vagueness in that first question, do you need sponsorship now or at any time in the future? Sponsorship, that's not a word. Sponsorship, that is not a word. I know from working with my international student office, we used these words. When I needed to work on campus, I had work authorization as a benefit of being an F1 student. If I needed to work off campus as a student, I needed CPT work authorization. After graduation, the words used by my school were again optional practical training, OPT work authorization after graduation. We called things like the H-1B, R1, or an E1, E2, we called those work visas. Sponsorship isn't work visa. Sponsorship isn't work authorization. The only time we used the word sponsorship at school was with employer-sponsored green cards or family-sponsored green cards. And when I read that question, I said, I don't need sponsorship now in school or sponsorship after I graduate. Why? Because I don't need a green card in the future or now. 6 years of H-1B would have been good enough. Oh, when you said sponsorship, you meant that word to mean work authorization or work visa? Oh, misunderstanding. Maybe you shouldn't use a word that has more than one definition. So sorry. And the other source of vagueness, need. Do you need sponsorship now or at any time in the future? Need. I need oxygen. I need food. I need shelter. I need, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the last thing I need is a visa or a sponsorship or work authorization. I need oxygen. I need food. I need shelter. Now that's ridiculous, okay? Okay, that's ridiculous. My personal favorite is the vague word sponsorship. Looking at the other two questions, these are a study in contrast based on one word. One word. Remember, we want your answer to be true at the time you check the box while you're in school. Let's look at the next two questions as a unit. Here are the last two questions as a unit. 1. Are you legally authorized to work in the U.S.? 2. Are you permanently authorized to work in the U.S.? What's the one word difference? Permanently, the word permanently. Are you legally authorized to work in the United States? Are you permanently authorized to work in the United States? Well, are you legally authorized to work when you check the box on the application when you're in school? Of course you are. You're legally authorized to work on campus. You're legally authorized to work on CPT. You will even be legally authorized to work on OPT after you graduate. But are you permanently authorized to work in the United States? Permanently? Permanently? No. There you got to tell the truth, and there you got to say no. That's the only well-written question in the bunch. Are you permanently authorized to work? Brilliant and simple. Working on campus isn't permanent. It stops as a benefit when you graduate. Working on CPT isn't permanent. It stops as a benefit when you graduate. Even working on OPT is not permanent. It expires eventually, and then you're going to need an H-1B. Are you permanently authorized to work in the United States? No. That's the truth. Do you see? Do you see the kind of burden you have? You didn't even know you had this burden. Now you do. Thanks a lot, Art. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Is there any methodology? Is there any methodology that can help me, the student? Is there any methodology that can help me figure out even which companies sponsor the H-1B to begin with? The answer is yes. Yes, there is. Okay, in terms of a methodology, how do you go about answering these questions? Well, if a typical question is, do you need sponsorship now or at any time in the future? You might want to ask yourself, as part of the process of answering these questions, does the employer sponsor work visas like an H-1B? Have they ever sponsored a work visa in the past? And the answer is go to this visa website, this one, myvisajobs.com. It's important to know if an H-1B has been sponsored by a company in the past, because if you know a company has sponsored 1 or 20 or 200 or 2,000 H-1Bs over the past 10 years, then you know that the stakes are a little lower when they ask you on the application, do you need sponsorship? Are you authorized to work? If they've sponsored H-1Bs in the past, does it matter what you say? If you say, yeah, I need sponsorship, then they'll probably get you sponsorship. So if my visa job says a company has sponsored a lot of H-1Bs in the past, answer the question however you want. If, however, my visa jobs is silent, what if the company you're looking for does not show up in myvisajobs.com? What do you do? What do you do? Take a look. If the company you're interested in is not listed in myvisajobs.com, then you should answer the immigration question on the application in a way that maximizes your chance to get the job interview. The next step in the process is the interview. Why? And without the job interview, a necessary step between the application and the job offer. Without the job interview, you're never going to get a job offer. You will I'll repeat it again. You will never get a job offer unless you get an interview first. Think about it. One final note regarding your methodology for answering job application questions. Always tell the truth. Remember, always tell the truth. And if a question is vague, your answer needs to be true. And now, a word of caution. Did you get a job offer and did you avoid all talk of immigration? If so, if you've gotten a job and avoided talking about immigration, you might want to mention the need for your, quote, sponsorship. Let me tell you why. Why, as a cautionary tale, is it important for you to talk about the need for sponsorship? Now, this is up to you. It's up to you. But let me tell you what happened 3 times that I know about in the past 14 years. Here's what I know. 3 students got all the way through the interview process for employment on OPT. They interviewed while they were in school. They got through the whole process and no one asked them a word about H-1B. No one, because nobody knew. The kid gets the job interview, gets the job offer, shows up on the first day of OPT and goes to the lady in human resources, and the lady in human resources, she knew. The lady in human resources says, wait, whoa. You're giving me an OPT card? I can't accept this OPT card as evidence of your ability to work because we don't sponsor H-1Bs. Are you ready? Are you ready? The lady says, didn't any of the managers ask you if you needed sponsorship after OPT? Because if you said yes, you would have never gotten a job offer. So the lady says, let me see how you answered the question on your job application. And she looks at the job application and they ask the kid, are you authorized to work in America? He checks yes. And the lady has the nerve to say to him, oh, the offer we just gave you, you're fired. You're fired because you lied on this job application. You said you were authorized to work, but it's obvious you're not because you don't have the ability to get an H-1B because we don't sponsor H-1Bs. So you're not authorized to work. And then the kid says, but I am. I have OPT. That's authorization. And the lady goes, come on. You knew what we meant. You knew what we meant. Now, in that situation, who is the bad actor and who is being sincere? The lady or the student? You decide. Job search tips dealing with immigration questions at interviews and at job fairs. For a full explanation of the following 5 slides, check out the Immigration Art video channel on YouTube. There I am. There's my face talking about this topic, job interviews, answering immigration questions for an entire, I talked for 17 minutes, 44 seconds, 17:44. Go to this link on the internet. You'll find me on YouTube. There I am. Let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1 for the job interview. First impressions matter. Please don't start talking about immigration too much, too soon. Do not start talking about immigration too much, too soon. Take a look. Job search tip number 1 for interviews and job fairs. The first meeting with an employer or a recruiter is like a first date. Do not ask for marriage before the waiter brings the menu. Don't mention immigration or sponsorship too soon. Don't do it. Don't look too eager. It's weird. Don't do it. Second, talk about what you bring to the relationship. If you're on a date, why would your date want to go out with you more after the first date? What is it about you that makes you so special? And remember, your goal is to get a second date. Tip number 2. If a recruiter tells you that his company does not sponsor for work visas after OPT, he may be right or he may be wrong. Do not assume that the people that are sent to college campuses to interview you, don't assume they know anything about immigration, because sometimes they know nothing. Zero. Let me say it again. Sometimes they know nothing about immigration. Zero. Lots and lots of nothing. Here are a few general rules about who sponsors work visas. Tip number 2. Does the employer sponsor? Well, there's some general guidelines. A large company, a very big company, has a policy, and it's either going to be a yes, we sponsor, or a no, we don't. Look in myvisajobs.com, and if a company appears in there, then they do sponsor. Mid-sized companies, they may say, the recruiter may tell you that they don't sponsor, but maybe they do. Maybe they're just afraid, or they're unaware, or they've never really had a good H-1B sponsorship experience before. So if a mid-sized company says they don't sponsor, maybe they really will. And small companies just want the smartest, hardest working person for the job, and they'll be flexible. The only risk with a small company is that it might be too small, and we'll talk about what the government guidelines are for determining if a company is too small. That's the 10-25-10 guideline. Tip number 3, the slide of shame. I joke about this because you either have to joke and laugh or you cry, but please remember, does it make any sense at all for an American employer to be asking you, an international student, if they, the American, can hire you under United States immigration law. Shame, shame, shame on these employers who don't know their own law. And it's unfair to put the burden on you. It's unfair. So, what do you do? What do you do? Take a look.
Tip number 3, shame. The slide of shame. It is a shame that a United States employer is going to ask you, an international student, to explain United States immigration law to them, the United States employer. Doesn't that sound crazy to you?
Remember, your job is to get the job offer. Your job is not to take a United States immigration law verbal pop quiz. You did not study for that pop quiz. Instead, do this. Answer tiny immigration questions only. To be polite, answer tiny little immigration questions and then dump on me the big immigration questions. I'll answer the big immigration questions for you. You've got to focus on your resume, your credentials. You've got to tell the interviewer why you love his company and what you can offer that company. You need to give them a reason to give you a job. Dump the rest on me. Okay, that begs the question. When does an employer start asking big immigration questions that need to be dumped on me? Well, here's some small, tiny, these are okay. These are tiny little immigration questions. 1, are you authorized to work for our company? That's a tiny question. The answer is yes. Give them a tiny little answer. Yes, of course I'm authorized to work for your company. They'll keep at it. They'll say, how are you authorized to work? And then you say, oh, I have OPT. It's work authorization. The school does all the work with me. We, the school and I, get the work authorization. You don't have to do anything. I just show up on day 1 ready, and I'm ready to work. That's okay. But then they're going to ask, OPT, huh? Sounds good. Is that good forever? Is that like a green card? And then you say, no. OPT is good for at least a year. Will they leave you alone? No. Then they're going to say,
Well, what happens after OPT expires?
that is a big question. Don't answer that question. What happens after OPT? That question is huge. It's huge. Dump that question on me. Take a look. Here's more information about the methodology to dump the big questions on me. Dump the big questions on me so you can focus in the interview on you. Use this prop. It's a memo, my H-1B memo. I personalize it. Ask me for one. I put your name and your school's name in the first sentence, and I tell the interviewer that I'm writing as a courtesy to you and your school. The memo addresses the following 4 points. You can see that I've been checking the 4 points off one by one, and now let's review each one individually. First, the employer is afraid that to hire you as an H-1B, they have to do extra advertising. That's not true. They also fear that because the H-1B is for a period of 3 years, that they're stuck with you. They can't fire you. That's not true. And the last 2 things, they're worried that the H-1B is complicated and that they have to pay all the costs. That's not true. The costs are negotiable. I and my law office make the H-1B process as painless and as easy as possible for the employer. And you, as an employee, can quit, or, heaven forbid, the employer can fire you. You are not stuck in the job just because you have an H-1B. We look forward to your coming back. Stay tuned.